What's good, everybody? Before we get into this episode with Dr. Joe LaPlaca, I want you guys to take the time to visit Aries Elite Sports Vision. They are doing some great things in the world of sports performance on the vision and brain side of things, and it's on the vision and neuro side of things. And they have offered our listeners, our subscribers, the opportunity to enjoy their services for a discounted rate. Enjoy 10% off when you use code Legends10, and you can enjoy their services and look into it and maybe get something from it. With that being said, the first 3 to 4 minutes of this episode may be a little choppy because my mic was hot. So if you want to fast forward through, you can. Feel free to do that. But with that being said, let's jump into the show. Be legendary. So we have Dr. Joe LaPlaca here with Aries Elite Sports Vision. They are doing some great things as far as like on the neurocognitive side of things, visual aspect of things as well. And if you have not, before I even get into his formal intro, if you have not taken the time, they are on TikTok, they're on Instagram, and I believe Facebook, if I'm correct. And so you can find their work there. And they have a lot of good stuff that it doesn't take a lot of time to consume, but it's also high quality stuff. So go over and do those things as well. Now that I got that part, the informal out the way, let me formally introduce you, Dr. Joe, to our audience. You were born in Chicago, Illinois, and raised in Jacksonville, Wisconsin. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah.
Janesville, Wisconsin. And you combine the Midwest grit with the cutting edge vision care, earning your undergrad at Marquette University in Milwaukee and your doctorate of optometry from Illinois College of Optometry in Chicago. Dr. Joe founded Aries Elite Sports Vision in 2018, which focuses on giving athletes that competitive advantage that they deserve in the arena of sports. And so we're excited to have you here. I would like for you to introduce yourself or give us a little bit more about yourself that I maybe didn't get a chance to cover there briefly, and we'll get into the show.
That's a pretty good intro. My better half is my wife Deanna, and I have 2 kids. And my daughter's name is Remy. My son's name is Asher, and then we got 2 dogs. So um, that's where a lot of my focus is on my family and in God, and sports and the business side is the other thing that I'm super passionate about. And I think a lot of good for a lot of young athletes, a lot of older athletes who are having problems or issues, or even if they're not, we can help them provide to how they're performing in their sport at their position, and just
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the work that you all are doing, even though we're talking about the arena of sports, I can see where it could transcend sports into other areas of life as far as just developing overall in age as we get older, keeping us strong and sharp mentally as well as keeping our vision intact. And I think some of those muscles and tools that we kind of go through life and take them for granted, like we always use our vision of things that are in front of us. So we always measure 20/20 vision, things like that, but just going even deeper into detail about peripheral vision, things like that you don't really think of every day. I think what you guys are doing is great on that end and in that aspect in the arena.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, because yeah, so let's say you have a young athlete who is
Mm-hmm.
what they're doing in their sport. Them, we're doing all of this stuff. It's also going to leak over into schoolwork. They're going to be able to take information better. They're going to be able to process that information better. They're going
Mm-hmm.
to be able to have confidence that their vision and their accomplish these tasks is greatly improved. And they might not understand that all the time when they're in school.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that stuff is a direct of what we do. And so we like to frame it as like, hey, we're going to make you better in your sport. And dad on the side, we say, hey, but they're also going to get better in school, because this is going to help
Right.
them just with all of the things in their everyday life. And then as far as like a longevity thing, it's just going to be so good for you in your brain. So we have some athletes who are 70 years old playing pickleball, and
Mm-hmm.
want to be sharp for when they're 80 and when they're 90. Like, they're looking at later years in their life, and like they understand how important ability over time, that naturally decreases. And if we can keep it at well, like that's
Mm-hmm.
important for people at the end of their life. And so um, there's a wide range of benefits in all of this for everybody.
Yes, sir. And that drives me into the first question I had. What was the motivator for you, or what sparked your interest into jumping into the vision aspect, not just normal practice, but what sparked your interest into delving into the world of sports and how vision could affect athletes in sport?
That's origin story questions, right? Like it's like why would you want to do this? Um, the reasoning is because I played sports my entire life growing up, like you know
Hmm.
everything that you could think of, I played, and was naturally just gifted at those sports and gifted enough to play at college level. But like I could,
Yeah,
I was good,
yeah,
and if I had maybe a little bit better work ethic, maybe I could have done something in school. But
yes, sir. I completely understand that.
and so then I kind of stopped playing sports for a little bit, and then I concentrated on studies. Went to school, did undergrad at Marquette, and did pre med, and and then I went to optometry school. It was between like optometry school, dental school, or
Hmm.
chiropractic, and I thought optometry school was cool. And in optometry school, there wasn't really any like sports vision. There wasn't any like aspect of this for athletes in general. Not like I felt like we were missing a big opportunity, or like at least missing a big population that is typically underserved. I know that sounds weird, but most athletes
Yeah.
have really good vision, or they feel that they have really good vision, which is why they're successful at their sport.
Hmm.
A high percentage of them are struggling with issues that they don't know that they're struggling with. And like in optometry school, I was like, gosh, like I feel like there's probably something here. And that I asked was like, nah, you could probably do it as like a side practice, or like maybe just like every once in a while when a patient comes in, and didn't believe them. And so 6 years
Yes,
ago,
sir.
I was finally fed up with the corporate world, and I was like, I'm gonna go do this thing that I know is there, and just nobody's doing it yet, or to the level that I thought it should be done at and the way it should be done. So it's one of those things where like I had to just go scratch my own itch and be like, can this is this a feasible business? And then if that's the case, then like how do we then make it a real lot of athletes? And I'm so happy that I took that shot on myself. You know,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I definitely agree. I mean, that's kind of the same, not the exact same, but a little along the lines of the of how Legends of Athletics got started. I mean, I know 10 years ago I started in 2014. At that time, it was under a different name, but I kind of did it like as a side project to start, and then 2 years ago I jumped into it full time, and it's something that I didn't regret. Because before that I did medical sales, and so I sold wheelchairs and measured people for wheelchairs and medical equipment and things like that. And so some of our greatest gifts are seeing the opportunities there that others don't, but then also using the gift that you have to impact the lives of others in the process. And so I think like the reason that I wanted to start with that, I know it's a basic but yet unique question, is because I've never heard of an optometrist or really anybody in that space who really has a taking to sports. Like I said, the basic, or I talked about before we jumped on the podcast, the basic things I've normally seen are just, oh, this athlete can't see very well, let's get them some contacts, let's get them some addressing the root of the problem really hasn't been there a whole lot. It's more like, let's, and I hate to say it's not really a band-aid, but let's I don't know, let's just pacify the problem for now, but you never really address it to even get it better, if it can become better. And so like I said, just listening to you and reading up on what y'all are doing is so unique in that aspect, in that arena.
I think the thing that like necessarily think it's anybody's fault, right? Like because that's the only
Yeah, 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 yeah. Right, right, right.
people understand is available to them. And so,
Hmm.
if you have a coach and he sees a kid can't see to a certain point, like there's not a lot of options to send him to a sports vision optometrist because there's not a lot of us out there yet. And
Right.
um, I run into like high athletes, and 90% of them have never heard of sports vision optometry. So like I have to
Hmm.
constantly be in this like education mode of, hey, this is what we do, this is why it's different from your general optometrist, and this is the value that we can provide you. And I think that just most parents and coaches don't even know that it's an option or something that they might even have in their area, which I think what you guys do in podcasting in general, and they are a message to those parents who maybe had no idea that this exists, and it could be really impactful and beneficial for their young athlete.
Yes, sir. Let me ask you this question: does vision strength or weakness, how does that affect athletes' mental processing speed within their selective sports?
Think about it like this. So if you're having a vision problem, right? If we let's
Hmm.
correct it with glasses or contacts. That's the easiest, lowest level of hanging fruit. Cool. Now you can see clearly, but do your eyes work together well? Do they track and follow an object well? How do they
Hmm.
integrate each piece together in your brain? So like each eye is taking in different information, and we use information to judge depth. We use that information to judge like our world around us, right? But our
Right.
brain has to put all of that stuff together. Already lifting 50 pounds just to have your vision, like just to work on your vision. Well, now the mental aspect of it is already behind. Like you're already behind because you're having a vision problem. And so that stuff up first, and then clean up the mental aspect of things. And when you talk mental, I'm thinking like how like physiology of the brain works, like how does the information
Hmm.
travel, how fast does it get there, all of. But then there's also like the mental component of dealing with emotions and dealing with the surrounding fans booing at you and yelling things at you.
Right. Right.
Like all of those things are audit visual inputs that your brain has to like do stuff with, right? And so
Hmm.
with all of these things, how effective is that system that translate out of your sport? And if you can handle that stuff, you have a really good what's called a cognitive load. So how much
Hmm.
information we can put on your brain. But if you're already at a disadvantage because your vision sucks and you're having a problem there and you don't know about it, and then you're having to add all this additional stress on, like it's going to break down really easily. And you're going to get these kids who are having these problems, don't know how to explain these problems, and then they're going to send them to a mental coach or a sport psych, and that's
Yeah.
going to be the problem. And they'll look back and say, well, this kid hasn't had a evaluation or an exam
Hmm.
in his life. Percentage of young athletes, and we need to start addressing the vision stuff first, and then all the other things.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, because it's the same as in speed training. I mean, it's the same on that side. If an athlete can't see well, let's say the athlete is farsighted, or that athlete is nearsighted, and they don't have any type of corrective lenses, they don't have anything that has helped improve that vision. Well, that does affect how they approach speed training. So the athlete may appear slower because the ground may seem like it's closer to him or further away from him, and the brain has to process that. So the first thing that our brains want to do is protect us from any type of danger. So if the floor seems like it's close to you, then why would I step down hard? If it seems like it's further away from you, then why would I take that big step down, or why would I step out beyond where I am because it seems like I'm stepping off of a ledge or something? And so I do completely understand and agree with you there. And I think that that's something like whenever we go through athletes getting their physicals before the or at the beginning of school year or before they play a sport, sometimes it can be missed very easily because it's just the volume of who they have to see in a day, and then how many they have coming through the shoot in the day. And so I think whenever you talk about sports one is not a long lifespan. Even if a person plays until the age of 30, it's just not a long lifespan. And so we have to take every aspect into account that we can. And I think, like you were saying, I just think that maybe one of the boxes that doesn't get checked yearly, as far as like let's get the eyes checked from season to season and time to time, things like that. Which that drives us into another question that I have for you. Did you have something else to say on that? I'm sorry.
Like and it becomes that difference, right? Like yeah,
Hmm.
they're gonna do a vision screening maybe at the med,
Right.
but vision screening is just this
Yep.
and then straight ahead, right? Like that's not really giving any information. And the like the general optometrist, they're not looking to see if you're an athlete, and so they're just treating you just like any other person, right?
Hmm.
And we get you to 2020, in the sports vision performance evaluation, like I'm get you better than 20/20. I'm looking to get you at your absolute maximum, and then we're looking at all these other
Exactly.
components that affect your vision. And so, if you're doing a reaction drill and you throw a ball up and you're 20 feet away, and one kid can see and one kid can't see very well, they can't see the ball,
Mm-hmm.
blurry. Well, that kid's going to be at an obvious disadvantage.
Right.
That all of that correlates to performance, and are we checking every box? And I right now I don't think that it's anybody's fault. I just think that people need to know that there's a better option out there for their kids.
Yeah, and I will say too, and I want to add to what you're saying is that in the realm of sports, it's a little different. It's kind of like when somebody goes to physical therapy. I mean, physical therapy for an athlete versus a geriatric patient, two different protocols. One may be coming back from an ACL repair and just needs to walk. The other may be coming back from an ACL repair, needs to walk, run, cut, jump, skip on a dime at a moment's notice. And so those are two different approaches to the same problem. And so I think that that's the biggest thing. It kind of to go with what you're saying and the box. It is like when you niche it to one thing, then it could be the same problem, but it's just a different approach to getting the most from that problem versus let's do the minimum viable thing to get you going and going throughout your day. But with that topic, I had this question on down my list, but I want to ask you this question while we're here because I think it goes in line with what we're talking about. In contact sports, the first question I want to ask, it's a two-part question, is does contact sports affect vision?
I have a lot of thoughts around this, especially within concussion.
Mm-hmm.
So even if let's use the offensive line of the NFL
Okay. Yep.
and defensive line of the NFL, they are every single play they're going against.
Yeah, micro hits. Yep.
Maybe they're not having concussions. They're not having like full-fledged diagnosed like concussions, but they're having subconcussive events every single time. It's like they're literally getting hit by a car going 30 miles an hour. Like that's what
Mm-hmm.
that impact is like. Damage to the brain, right? And the information that runs from our eyes through our brain pass through all of those pathways. And so
Mm-hmm.
if there is a problem, then that is going to affect our visual system. It's going to affect our occipital lobe, our parietal lobe, like our executive decision, depending on where those events are happening mostly. And all of that
Yes, sir.
is affected by those events. And our brain, every right now, we're using 50% of our brain for vision or some sort of perception aspect. So half of our brain is always being used for everything. And
Right.
there's no way that if in sports that your eyes and your brain are not affected by this stuff.
Yes. So that's the first part of that question. The second part is can the damage that we do in season be restored or repaired somewhat in our off season? So let's say we have a high school athlete that plays, we'll stick with football. They play football from August or late August until early December. And then let's say they have a complete off season where they don't play any spring football at all. So from mid December up until next August, could some of that micro damage be restored or repaired, or would those effects be permanent?
Jury's still out on some of that stuff. I
Mm-hmm.
fear that what's happening in a concussion is so there's the neurons themselves, and then there's their axon, and then there's this
Mm-hmm.
sheathing around it, right? But what's
Yep.
happening
To
is,
protect.
yep, you're getting broken. So like there's gonna be some broken information that travels is getting broken,
Mm-hmm.
actually like physically broken, and so we can't really repair that part of it. But
Right.
things that we can do to create what's called neurogenesis is to like re-stimulate the growth of new, and so
Right. Right. Right.
that is kind of forefront of like how is this stuff impacting neurogenesis and growth of those new neurons, and like how are we rewiring the brain? All that stuff is in some like early, not trial, but like earlier development.
Mm-hmm.
There's a way that we can, there's some of those breaks, but definitive answer as to like what level we can reaccomplish that, right? But
Yes, sir.
the main thing that I would think that we want to focus on is like baseline before the season started. What did your baseline sports vision performance evaluation tell us? That here's what your score is on this thing. Here's what your score is on this thing. And then when we get a subconcussive hit, and we're like, hey, things feel slow, or I feel like a little bit off, we can go back to that baseline now objectively and say, okay, you are clearly deficit in these areas. We need to get you at least back up to where you started, and then continue.
Yes, sir.
And then continue to grow from there. We can manage that over the course of an athlete's career. I think we have a better success of impacting their everyday life, or having a secondary concussive event, which puts them into like a post-concussive syndrome type of space.
Mm-hmm.
And so we want to avoid those things at all costs.
Yes, sir. And that was something that I looked at this year. I forgot who I was listening to or talking to, but it was something that I kind of played around with the idea this year before some of the guys I work with over the summer or work with throughout the year, the ones that play football, like kind of playing around with some of those assessments and tests, just to see like where they are in season. I mean preseason, and then where they are in season, and then where they are postseason. Because I found that interesting. Like, because I played football, that was something that I never really took into account until somebody just brought it up, and I was like, man, you know what? I do kind of remember being like a little off here, where that didn't affect me 3 weeks prior or a month prior. That started affecting me, and then at the end of the season, I may not like vertigo or something, but you may stand up and you feel like a little off, or maybe your head's tilted a little bit, or maybe your equilibrium is the word I'm looking for. It maybe equilibrium is a little off, and so I've always wondered like how that affected vision, because I know even when I had eye exams, then even when I was playing, I had a few, but when I had those, I know that I'm not sure. You can tell me, Dr. Joe, if I'm on or off with this. But at that time, I didn't think that vision could improve like a lot. But for whatever reason, depending on what time of year it was that I had an eye exam, like my vision would be better or a lot better. And then sometimes it would be worse, or they would say like, oh, your vision doesn't look as clear or something. And so I could tell that things may be going on like in my head, but I didn't know how to verbalize that, or if it was something that I was just thinking, or if it was real. And I think that's something that contact sport athletes, football players, really like paint players in basketball, even soccer to an extent, and some athletes, I just say athletes in general because I can go down the line, may not feel very comfortable saying, but you kind of can know it. Because I look at it like this, and I'll be brief with this and say, it's like a receiver. That receiver probably can catch a go route in shorts and t-shirt 6 times out of 6 preseason. But then you get in season, of course, you add a helmet, so you're cutting off some of your field to see, and you have to use more of your peripheral vision before it gets into your full sight, until it gets to your full field, depending on where you're catching the ball from. Then it goes down to 4 out of 6. But then we may be wondering, why is it 1 out of 6 at the end of the year? Well, we're not counting all the micro hits. We're not counting maybe they're a little off, or we're not doing any testing at all to see how that vision has improved or not improved, or even regressed as the season has gone about. So I didn't know if that was something that may be mental or real.
I think it's 100% there, because NFL, they're not still not testing the visual system, like the binocular vision system, right? So they might be running like S2 cognition to see like which quarterback can process information faster, or which one
Right.
can read multiple objects moving at the same time. Like, but they're really cognitive. Like it doesn't take into effect how they're aligned, how they together, how they process information together. And a huge percentage, 75-80% of concussions have a binocular vision issue related to that, because that's how concussions work, right? Like your eyes don't come together as well, as strongly, or they don't go out as quickly, or they're not tracking back and forth as together, right? And so that's when you say I was a little bit off, or I felt like I wasn't like, I didn't feel confident in my step forward, or I felt dizzy when I stood up. Like all of that is vision, right? Because all that information has to come in through your visual system, which is also tied to your vestibular system, and those things play together. And if one's off, it's going to trigger the other one to be off, and going to be affected. The first hit, the second hit, and then all of those are going to be cumulative adds to like you feeling shittier at the end of the season. And and then you rest for a few months, and then you feel a little bit better, and you're like, okay, I can go back and do this again. But to what is the damage there? You don't know. And then this new normal, which might have been your old.
Yep.
So you're going off of a different normal than when you were 18 or 18, because now you have all these hits over the course of 4-year career.
Yes, sir. So let me ask you this. Is there a way, I know you kind of alluded to it, talking about assessments and screenings and things like that, but is there a way to measure athletes' visual strength and weakness? Is it kind of like, do y'all approach the measurement system as like PT and OT or rehab settings where they say this person's a 1, a 2, a 3, 4, or 5? Or how do y'all measure that visual strength and weakness? Because I know some people may be thinking, when you're talking about vision or you're talking about the brain or anything internal, it's not like outward. So we can't see it. It's not like somebody bench pressing 225 pounds. You can't say they squat this much. So it's not that exact number. So that's why I want to ask you that. Like, how do y'all measure it?
Everything is completely objective. It's not me saying they're about this. It's me looking at raw data based on the equipment and the information that we gather. So, you see this behind me here. That's Synaptech.
Yes, sir.
That's a Synaptech sensory station. Fit lights, which are reaction.
I've seen those.
Which is a definite number. We also use reality headset, MetaQuest 3, and traditional optometry stuff that we've combined all of these things into a comprehensive evaluation that is completely objective. My opinion on this stuff doesn't matter. Like, and I wanted to set it up that way because then each athlete can know, like, this is what my number was before I started the season. Like, your raw reaction time was 251 milliseconds based on this test that we did in the virtual reality. Now it's 284. That's a 30 millisecond decrease. Something happened. Or, hey, now your decision making time is 180 milliseconds, whereas before it was 130. Right? We can objectively say this is where you were and this is where you're at. Not
exactly.
I'm not grading it on a 1 to 5. I'm grading it on these are the numbers that you gave us when we did your initial evaluation.
Yep. Like from your baseline until where you are currently.
And then once we're done with that evaluation, we send it out to the and it's about a 52 page that all of their metrics, all of their numbers. So we are completely transparent, meaning like, this is how you did. Here's the problems that we see. Here are the ways that we're going to clean it up. And this is what we do to move forward.
Yes, sir.
And now when we come back next year, we can say, okay, we did the evaluation again and you improved, or you got worse, or you're exactly the same because we didn't do training or whatever that is.
Yeah, that works. I want to ask you this. I want to keep going because I think it's a good conversation. You talked about this earlier in the podcast. You didn't discuss it, but you mentioned it. You talked about cognitive load, and I wanted you to kind of go a little bit more into detail with cognitive load as well. Because when I think of cognitive load, I think of the sport of basketball, and y'all have this on y'all's TikTok, and so I was kind of in the same line with that. Basketball is very unique. It's not like football is kind of that way as well. American football is that way as well. But basketball and football are two sports I think about where coaches are kind of involved the majority of the time with a player as far as verbal instruction. So taking things in audibly. Also with scenes. The biggest thing I've seen is when an athlete goes from high school and they play in college, the depth perception is one thing, but also what you're seeing in an environment is different. So in high school, most of the times they'll see their normal basketball goal with a white wall behind it. And in college, of course, they play on a pro style goal. So now you have people behind it versus a white wall. So that's a whole lot different to see. While also, like if a person plays a position like point guard, the coach is audibly giving you things to process and put out to the team on the floor while you're bouncing the ball and having to process what you have a defender in front of you at the moment. So you have to react to them as well while taking in and giving out information. And so I wanted you to go over that because I like the videos that y'all did breaking down what JJ Redick said, because he said a ton in that entire clip. And I think people can hear it and it sounds cool and you can say like, oh, I understand that. But then after you watch that video and go about your day, you probably forget about it. And so when you talk about cognitive load, how would you describe cognitive load just to the average person?
Like really, like if you put yourself in the position of a point guard, right?
Mm-hmm.
Them just standing there and looking straight ahead, like that's zero cognitive load, right? Add in all these other different elements like the change in the backdrop, the crowd yelling, the counting down, the play in the the telling you, hey, if this happens, you got to call a timeout. It's like
Yeah.
that's all stuff you have to put into your brain, right? Like, and then still be able to do the tasks. And so the people who can do the of most of those tasks, like they have a history of doing really, their handle is great, so that's not something that they think about. Like they can just dribble.
Right.
That's made it, right? But if you have a younger kid who is not the best dribbler, and then all of these things get on top of them, they're going to turn the ball over because that's not an automated piece. And then all of these other things are now consuming energy in their brain on top of dribble it, right? So it's how proficient can you be at automating certain tasks, and how well have you done that over time? A new component, to add a new play call, to add a change in circumstance and a new variable that you didn't expect to happen, adjust for it. And so what is really how much can you put in and automate and then add a new task or a change in your variable to then be successful.
Yes, sir.
When JJ's talking about that with Jokic or like what he's saying is these guys have reps, they have so much NBA IQ that a lot of that stuff is automated. When LeBron, hey, we're going to run this play, LeBron puts it in and he stores it. It's just like running a video game for him. So it's stored and he doesn't have to think about it again. But if it's a lower level player and he hasn't run that play a whole bunch, he has to now think like, okay, what do I do when this guy does this?
Yep.
Other piece of information. And so that's a difference.
Yeah, and I've seen that where athletes have gotten frustrated. You can see it in body language because they may say something to the effect of, well, coach, I didn't know he was about to jump it because you were talking to me. Or I couldn't hear you because this person was saying X, Y, Z. Or they forgot you were talking about the clock. They forgot about the clock because they've gotten locked into what he's saying while trying to remember to keep the ball going, keep dribbling the ball at the same time. And so yeah, I definitely like that. I think that's a good thing to get out there because again, we talk about sports terminology. That's something that I have like I like the term, and I know I'll probably start using it more. But it just describes. It's a great descriptor of what's happening in the world of athletics because sports is not simply. I told you this again, like going back to kind of the short time we had before we jumped on. Sports is not simply just getting better physically, but you also have to take into account everything. It's just like you go to a football game on a Friday night, or you go to a rainy day football game. It's all the same. You may see mist, you may see smoke, you may be able to smell the concession stand, you may be able to smell the grass. You know, you're taking in things through all your sensory input. and you have to be able to take those things in, but also give a good output in order to be an elite level athlete. And I think that's where, where you marry all the disciplines of like y'all are doing with sports, elite sports vision, but then you also marry in the cognitive side. So where's your mental at? And then you add the physical side. Where's your sports performance at? And then your tactical, technical aspects of it. And you put all that together, and that's when you get great athletes. And those athletes that can do all those things at a high clip are able to go on and play next level and even have a chance at a professional career as well.
You look at players like Tom Brady, and you look at LeBron, and you look at Russell Wilson, and like these high level players, they have people
Mm-hmm.
for everything. They have people for their nutrition. They have people for their sleep. They have people for their sports psychology. Like they're not spending millions of dollars on this stuff because it doesn't matter, right? They understand that it's a holistic piece. Everything is important because everything directly affects their overall success. So they're willing to spend money on these things because the ROI
Mm-hmm.
is so great when they get their next contract that's $300 million, right? Like
Exactly.
little things that they had to do behind the scenes that nobody saw or really discussed, they that stuff so that they could get to the next level to be that elite space. And that's really how I think athletes need to think about this. Like, what is my hydration at?
Mm-hmm.
What is my sleep at? What is my nutrition at? Like, what supplements am I taking, and how are these benefiting everything that I'm doing, and how do all these little pieces add up to my opponent?
Exactly. And it's all about that 1 to 2%, because the higher you go up in levels, just like with a profession, it's really not the big stuff. It's like you're 1 or 2% better. It's not like that big gap of 20% or 30%, but it's just the small details. Like Aries Elite Sports Vision versus other people. Like it's those small nuanced things. But let me ask you this. Well, I'm gonna ask you this to get out of here, right? So this is gonna be a very light question. I seen your assistant. She sent over two of the life principles that you like to live by, and so one of them I seen. I wanted to ask you about it because it's something that I kind of say. And it's also a way of life that I kind of adopted for myself, and that is nobody cares, work harder. What inspired you to make that a part of one of your principles of life?
Building this business, I worked the first few years. I did everything for free because I had to gain the
Mm-hmm.
knowledge. I had to gain the knowledge in what I was doing to understand what this could potentially be in terms of a business, and the equipment that I needed. What was this like? All of the things that I had to do, the hours that I put in, and it's a very like lonely place a lot of the time, and nobody really cares. Not I'm not trying like I'm saying from a work standpoint, nobody really cares. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
there's
I completely understand.
stuff going on. Everybody's got their own problems, which is totally valid. It hit me one night, and I was just like, gosh, nobody cares. So I'm just gonna work harder. I'm gonna outwork everybody. I'm gonna outgrit everybody. And if I have to stay up until 3 o'clock in the morning to do this stuff and learn this information and understand all of this stuff that I didn't get in school, and I have to like go and research and do all of these things and break down papers and do all of that stuff that is time consuming. It's exhausting. Um, it really feels to me like nobody cares. Go work harder, do better, and become the best version of yourself. And that's really what I think that everybody should be striving for. And
Mm-hmm.
the whole like, oh, you're great as you are. Like everybody
Yeah.
should be better. Like
Yep.
I want to instill in my kids that yeah, you're great, but let's try and be better every single day. Like just be a better version of who you want to be in the future, so that when you look back 5 years in the future, you're gonna be like, okay, I was good there, but like I'm so much better here now.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, was that?
Chasing the future version of myself.
Oh, yes, sir. That's what life's all about, and all we can do is try to get better each and every day. And more times than not, who we are today is not going to be good enough for who we want to be in the future anyway. So that takes growth, and it takes just carving out like an artist. It takes carving out the parts of yourself that you need to improve on, and just making those sharper and smoother, so everybody can see the details of your work. And so I appreciate your time, Dr. Joe. I told you it's gonna be about 40 minutes. I'm usually pretty good on time, so I told you it'd be about 40 minutes. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you joining the podcast. Everybody who's listening to this podcast, remember, as I say all the time, take the road that's less traveled, get 1% better each and every day, and do the things the legends do and be legendary.